Hi everyone and welcome back. In today's video, from the perspective of AWS config rules, we are going to discuss about the rule evaluation mode, specifically the difference between the detective and proactive rules. Now before we do that, let's quickly spend 2 minutes to revise the basics of the AWS config rules. At a high level overview, the config rules are used to evaluate whether the AWS resources comply with the best practices that you have set as part of the rules. For example, organization would like to create a rule which states that SSH port should not have 0000. So this unrestricted access should not be present for some sensitive ports like SSH, RDP, the database port, etc. And once the rule is created, the config will go ahead and analyze the resources that are available in your organization. And if there are any resources that matches, then based on that, the compliance can be modified. So some resources will be compliant, some resources will not be compliant, and you will be able to see the details in the AWS config. Now let me also quickly show you this. So here in the AWS config dashboard, you see that in my account, I have certain rules that are non-compliant, certain rules that are compliant. Now you can also go ahead and in case if you would like, you can create your own set of rules. So either you can create the AWS managed rules, and in fact AWS managed rules are quite extensive. So you see you have 129 pages of AWS managed rules. In total 641 rules are available as of now that are pre-created. So you don't really have to create it from scratch. In case if you have some custom use case, you can also go ahead and create the custom set of rules as well. So now comes the important part for today's video, which is the rule evaluation mode. Whenever a AWS config rule is created, the config rule will have the evaluation mode of either detective or proactive. So it is important for us to understand the difference. Detective rules are basically the ones that evaluate the resources after a change has occurred. So they detect issues in the existing setup. Let us understand this. So let's go back to rules over here. And currently you will see that I have some rules that are already available. Now again, this is a demo video. Now each rule you will see it has the evaluation mode. Some rule has an evaluation mode of detective. Some rule has an evaluation mode of both proactive as well as detective. So it is important for us to understand the difference between both of them. So let's take one example. So this is the example that we are going to take, which is VPC security group open only to authorized ports. Now, if you see associated with this rule, there are so many non-compliant resources that are available. Now let's open this rule to see what exactly it does. Let's look into the description. What it states, check if security group allows unrestricted incoming traffic from everyone. So many times what happens, again, this is quite common. In many of the organization, you will see that some user has opened port 22 for the entire internet. Some user might have opened port of 3306, which is the database port for the entire internet. This is something that you do not really want. So this rule will help you. So within here, you can add some authorized ports, and apart from this authorized ports, if there are any other ports that are open for everyone, then those resources will be marked as non-compliant. Now, one thing that you will see is that this type of rules like the VPC security group rule that we saw, this rule will only work after the resource is created. For example, if a security group is created and the rules are added, then the security group will be evaluated. Based on that, you will get a compliant and non-compliant status. So this is what the detective evaluation mode really means. So just to revise, the detective rules, they detect issues in the existing setup which is already created. Now you also have one more evaluation mode, which is the proactive. Now the rules that support the proactive evaluation mode, these rules can evaluate configurations before the resources are created or updated, preventing the issues from happening. For example, someone is trying to create a security group with port 22 open for the entire world. Now, before the resource gets created, is there a way to verify whether the resource that you are trying to create, whether it complies against all of the config rules? Answer is yes, considering that the rule supports the proactive evaluation mode. So let's look into a sample workflow that will allow us to understand the use case where proactive based rule evaluation proves to be useful. So let's say that you have a CloudFormation and some users are trying to create a new stack. So maybe they might be creating multiple resources through CloudFormation. Now, CloudFormation, instead of directly creating the resources, it evaluates it against the AWS config rules. AWS config will say that whatever resource that the users are trying to create, it is non-compliant against the rules that are created. and CloudFormation will immediately give an error message to the user stating that dude, your resources are non-compliant, fix that, post which I'll be creating the resource in AWS. This is the first part. Then after some hard efforts to make the code more secure, the user has again started to create a stack at CloudFormation level, hoping to create the resource. CloudFormation again will verify against AWS config. AWS config will say that this time all of the resource that user is trying to create is compliant, and then CloudFormation, once it receives this positive response, it will go ahead and provision the resource for the users. So this is where the proactive based evaluation mode proves to be useful, where even before the resources are created, we can verify whether the resource is compliant against the AWS rules or not. So this is the basic. Let's have a small demo on this so that we understand this in a better term. Now for today's demo, we have a sample resource based configuration over here related to RDS. So let's say the user is trying to create a RDS DB instance, and within here you see the storage encrypted is set to false. Now within my environment, I have a very specific rule associated with RDS storage encrypted. Let's look into what exactly this rule does, and note that this supports both proactive and detective. Let's open this. Now what it states, it detects Amazon RDS database instances that are not encrypting their underlying storage. So here the user is trying to create the RDS instance with storage encrypted as false. So what this means is that this specific configuration is non-compliant against the rule. So if you create the RDS instance with this specification, then ultimately it will be non-compliant when AWS config will evaluate it here. So even before a resource gets created, if you have the configuration, you can evaluate that configuration against the AWS config here. So let's do one thing. Within the terminal, we'll go ahead and we'll run a specific CLI command. Again, note this is a demo video. The aim here is to understand the basic concept and the workflow. So what we are doing is we are starting the resource evaluation, and you see the evaluation mode is proactive, and the details about the resources is fetched from the resource.json file. So when we go ahead and we run this, it will go ahead and give us the evaluation ID. And then when we go ahead and analyze this specific evaluation ID over here, let's press enter over here. It will show you that the evaluation mode was proactive. This is something that we know, but the most important part is the compliance status. It is clearly stating that this is non-compliant. So this is the resource details that we are trying to create, and even before the resource is created, we can get the compliance status, whether it is compliant or non-compliant, and this helps quite a lot. So as part of the CI/CD pipeline, or even in CloudFormation, you can go ahead and create hooks where before CloudFormation creates anything, it will go ahead and verify the compliance status. In case if it is non-compliant, then it will not move forward. In case if it is compliant, then it will go ahead and create the resources. Alright, so I hope with this you understood the two important evaluation modes based on which the rules are created, and with this we'll conclude today's video.